Hey everyone. Oh, same track again. How's everybody doing? All right, well today, thanks so much for being here. Today I'm going to talk about what to do on a dominant 7th chord vamp. Just kind of fooling around with some ideas there, and we'll get into detail on what those ideas are. First off, I want to say I've got all my courses are on sale for 25% off if you use the link in the description center, the description section. And that's if you order those through my courses through my webpage, that's what I'm trying to say, you'll get 25% off if you use the Live 25. And I appreciate that. Thanks to Phil for being here today. And all right, let's talk about what I was doing there, for better or for worse. And all right, first thing. It's a G vamp, and this vamp is actually the history of this vamp, which you might have heard floating around. It's from one of Robin Ford's courses. It's from his first blues course at Treefire, and I was in charge of making the track. So I always loved the tune Chevrolet, you know. So it's just a 1-chord vamp, and this thing used to always really kind of vex me on what I can play on 1 chord. So if it's a G7 vamp, which is basically as our feeling is just as like, right, so we have a G7, so I have this F basically just going from F to G, and the implication is G7. It's not G minor 7, definitely G7. So the first thing I could think about is you can kind of vamp on G7 a little bit. Let's play that. So that single coil. Right, so that's a cool sound. So what I'm doing there is just playing my triad. I'm thinking G7 triad, but I'm actually playing the tritone, I should say. And that is, I'm playing the F and the B of my G7 chord. And that is what we call a tritone. The interval of the distance between F to B is 3 whole steps. So we call it a tritone. So the difference between F and B, F to G is a whole step, G to A is a whole step, and A to B is a whole step. So 3 whole steps, we call it a tritone. And it's also this sound, the devil's interval they used to call it. But this sound is the center of a dominant 7th chord, right? So we really can play that up. So the first thing I could do is just those 2 notes. Or I can grab the D, G, and B string. So I'm really getting this inner part of the G7 chord there. And I'm going to just bar, and I can get this C just as a little passing note thing. So let's hear that. Right? Now, that little lick I'm playing there, definitely a blues cliche. That kind of move. So, and I'm filling in those holes. I'm not really playing all the notes or all the rhythms. I'm not kind of going, the first thing I played, remember years ago when I had no idea, I'd be like, you know, trying to fill in every little hole, sounding terrible. So the main thing I want to do is not to fill in every hole and just complement what the bass is doing. And obviously the track builds up because we recorded it live, and that's what's the fun thing about this particular track, is that you can start to expand upon these ideas. So I'm just thinking that. Right? So what was I doing there? First move, this kind of move, the C, barring this chord right here, I'm getting a C. I don't so much see it as a C in this particular move, but we will in a minute. We talk about some triads we can use. I just see it as part of my G Mixolydian scale, which would be the parent scale of all of this. I'm playing a G7 chord. There's my scale, G, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. So I'm playing this lick. And I can play the G7 like this if I want. So I just played, all right, I'm playing G7. But I'm not going to play all of that. I'm just going to go right here. So the two little moves I did here, I can get this G7, get that C in the middle to the G7, or I can do, which is sort of like a G6. Not sort of like, it is a G6. It could be like a C major 7, but I'm hearing it as a G6. Like that kind of move, which is really cool. So you want to get that under your fingers. Now what I started to do is expand a little bit. I'm just still thinking G7 and G Mixolydian. I have right here. All right, so I have the B and the G, and I split up chromatically in G Mixolydian. So I'm going to go up in 6 to C and A, and I went up here with the D and the B, which is part of my G7 chord. So just take a look at that. So put on a track. Now I can bar. So let's hear that. So right? Okay, so sticking to basically just G Mixolydian. Now, I would be remiss if I didn't talk about my right hand, and that's where I'm kind of keeping this rhythm going along. That a 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E and a, right? But when I'm doing that, I'm not hitting every note. So let's hear what my underlying pulse is. Right? 1E and a 2E and a 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E and a 1E and a 2E. Now, these little ideas, right? Okay, so I'm just building off of those that G Mixolydian ideas and inversions of my G7 chord. G6, G7, G major. What kind of cool passing A minor triad to the G7. You've heard that a million times. My killing floor set. Right? So that move, You can hear it all the time. So that's a cool thing to start to base the ideas off of. So at no point did I just bang away on a G7 chord. I remember, as I said in the beginning, when I first saw these one chord vamps, I would get overwhelmed. I'm like, what do I play on that? And I would just play a G7 chord or a G9 chord and sound terrible. And when I'm listening back, if I remember what I played off the top, I'm playing a little better now. I always get nervous on these things. That first thing come in playing, I always get nervous. Yeah, whatever. All right. More so than on gigs. It's crazy. Anyway, all right, so that's my move, right? We're not changing keys on this, but say if we go to G7 or C7, made of blues. Right, same moves. All right, so let's expand a little bit more here. Kind of like all blues. So what I'm doing right here, G7, going that C in the middle, and I can go up to basically like a D minor, or I can see it as an F major triad. So let's hear that kind of move. So right. All right, so G major, C major, and that D minor triad, and all we're doing is playing notes and triads that are diatonic contained within the G7th scale, G Mixolydian. I like that sound a lot too. So here we're going to play that little G7 move. I'm going to go to a C triad. I'm going to play, this is just an inversion of a G7 chord. So here I have G, D, and F. So let's hear that. Kind of cool, right? Now, the main thing I was doing off the top, which was a real eye-opener for me and a little bit more in a sort of fusion-y way, was I used 3 triads. And I'm going to use C major triad, G major triad, and F major triad. Or a little more easy to see if I'm going to play, I'm thinking Mixolydian, G Mixolydian. My 3 major triads in G Mixolydian are G, F, and C. So I have my G triad, my C triad, my F triad, G triad, C, F, and G. And I'll do a whole lesson on triads coming up, but so if you learn them on top of each other, G, C, F, G, C, F, G, or C, F, G, F, C, G, F, C, G. Let's hear that. I'm going to play each of those triads over the vamp so we can hear they all sit. And they're really cool. So G, of course that's going to work, right? How about F? I love that. Just hear that sound. Like sit on that. It wants to pull. Back down here, F. G. Here's my F again. Let's go play Fs. And it wants to resolve up. I'm going to play C and F and G. How about that C? I like that. It wants to pull, right? But each of them has their own flavor. That C is probably the toughest one to sit on, but always resolve down to G. So the C to the G. How about all three? Right? And as a lead player, you got those choices too. All of kind of together. Bring back to the beginning, build up. All right, kind of cool. Now, obviously, or hopefully obviously, I wouldn't do all of that at once or as much of that as I just did. I was kind of playing out the sounds. If you did that much, you get the stink eye for sure, because that would be completely overplaying. So that's important that you don't overplay, and you want to practice on this stuff clearly. But these different sounds were, like I said initially earlier in my career, I wouldn't know what to do on a one-chord vamp. And I would hear songs that do it all the time, like Freeway Jam by Jeff Beck. You hear that sound and those changes. They can, and the piano or the keyboard, like, especially that F to that with the G in the bass, really pulls you forward. Right? So just following through that and listening through it. Now, as I said, the C major triad, it's a bit funky, that one. You know, you got to get used to it. Sitting on it is not the best sound all the time, but it really resolves nicely. And like I said, the more time you spend sitting on the chords and practicing how they sound or hearing how they sound, the more comfortable you're going to be with using them in your own playing. All right, so, you know, I like that F a lot. How about that C to F? C to G, sorry. Kind of cool. How about C, F, G? All right, and then F, C, G. They all kind of go somewhere, right? Now what I'm doing is I'm really favoring the D, G, and B strings. That's kind of where the money's at. You can go for the high strings too, of course. Those sound great. Of course. The low strings sound awesome too, but if you're going to start right in, you want to really dig into it, the D, G, and B strings are going to be the best, I'd say, you know, bang for your buck time-wise. So they all sound good, but getting to that is going to be really kind of cool. And it's not anything you don't know. Some people can call it the caged method if you want, but whatever. There's part of your C chord. There's part of your F chord, G chord, C chord, F. Right? And you can get into soloing with that, which we'll talk about in another another episode, because that's another whole huge thing. But if you get used to it on a rhythm guitar part and seeing how those triads, the three major triads sit over this vamp, it becomes extremely useful, because you come across Mixolydian vamps a lot, especially in jam bands or vamps at the beginning of a tune. Like even a blues tune will just start off with this one chord. Freeway jam is basically a one chord vamp for the most part. Then you have that little bridge. So when you solo over it, sometimes that's not that hard to do, right? If you're pentatonic scales, if you're comfortable with that. But playing rhythm was always the bigger challenge for me. So the C major, F major, and G major triads. And the reason why they work is G Mixolydian is the same key as C major or C Ionian. So we're going to share the same notes. So I look at it as the key of no sharps and flats. So I have the 1, 4, 5 in the key of C, which also happens to be the G, which would be the 1 now, flat 7, and then the 4. Okay, so the 1, the flat 7, and the 4. So that can be a little confusing, and but don't worry about it just yet. Look at the three major triads, put on this jam track, and just play them, and hear what they sound like, right? They sound really cool. You can do this in other modes. You can do this in any mode, actually, to greater or lesser extent. But I highly recommend you check it out in Mixolydian, because you're going to do it a lot once you get it together. If you listen back to the David Grissom lockdown I did, he talks about these three major triads. He uses them all the time. Doing a lot of teaching with Robin and working with Robin, he uses these all the time. Larry Carlton thinks about them. So triads are everything, and I see my buddy Corey is online, and Corey uses, we talk about this all the time, it all comes down to triads, really. So we're getting into the back door of starting to learn your triads, and once you learn your triads, you actually also start to learn your arpeggios and outlining the sounds of the chords. But the first kind of thing that really spurred me on to checking out my triads was something like this. Hearing this vamp and going, oh man, I can play those triads as passing chords to just create a sound, as opposed to playing that triad on that chord, right? So if you look at the F, with that G in the bass, you could kind of see it as a G7 with the 9 and a G7, G9 sus4, usually just written F/G. But you hear that a lot. And that chord, to me, screams Mixolydian. And then more so than Mixolydian, the way I identify these things, what does this sound like to you? This is like happy jam band to me, right? It's bluesy rock. So, like I said, Allman Brothers, jam bands like Fish and The Dead use this all the time. But it doesn't need to be that. It can just be straight on rock and roll. So it's what you can do on one chord. You can even do it on a blues. All these triads will work on the one chord of a blues. And if you really want to get into it, you can switch them up and play the 1 flat 7 and 4 of the 4 chord, and the 1 flat 7 and the 4 of the 5 chord on each of those chords, which I'm not going to do for you right now, but that is one really cool thing that you can do as well. All right, so let me know. Got some questions here about what to do here. So let's check it out, guys. Thanks for everybody for being here, as always. All right. Saying hi. Corey Congiulio's here. Triads, exactly. Hermano, Southern rock, yes. It's very Allman Brothers-y, like you said, or Southern rock-ish. All right. Okay. Nobody's really asking any questions. They're all just saying hi, which is totally cool. Thanks for saying hi. Okay. So, I'll just keep on talking. All right, so the G major triad. How do you guys like the logo? Pretty cool, huh? I like the logo. There it is. It's right over there. No, wait. It's right over there. Everything's backwards. Okay. Can you quickly go over again why the C triad works over the G? This is from Samuel Shaw. Can you quickly go over again why the C Triad works over the G? I get why the F works, but why does the C work? Is the C the 4? Yeah, it is. In the key of G Mixolydian, the notes would be root 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, flat 7. The same chords as the key of C major. So I'm going to have my 1 is G7. The 4 is going to be the C. And then the flat 7 will be the F. So yes, it's contained in the key of G Mixolydian. And also, if you look at the notes G Mixolydian, G, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Right? You got that right there. There's your G, your C triad right inside the scale. Right there. So yeah, it's diatonic to the key. Okay, so S.E. Nesbitt, work a 2-5 into that, 2-5-1 into that vamp. You could. Let's see what that sounds like. I mean, as a soloist, you could. You can hear that. Yeah, that would work. Actually, it'd be. No, that's right. But I mean, as a soloist, sure. So with my 2-5-1. No, wait, hold on. That wasn't right. That was not right. I guess I could 2-5-1 on that. Well, that's going to sound a bit funky because we have the F sharp. Let's see how it sounds. Let's just try it. I just hear the static groove. So putting the 2-5-1, it is the 5. I guess I could put the 2 before that. You know, the 2, which would be D minor 7 to the 5, which would be, that would be the 1. So like that. So here's the 2. So now, if you look at that, if you look at that, the F chord, right, which is the flat 7, if you put a D in the bass, that's a D minor 7. So D minor 7 is an F chord with D in the bass. So you can also look at it that way, why it works. But I wouldn't think of 2-5-1 necessarily. I would just think of a 2-1 because you're just sitting on a 1 chord. The 1 would be C major 7. But if I did 2-5-1 of G, I would get A minor 7 to G7 to D7, and that F sharp can sound okay as a passing tone, but sometimes it's I don't really do that. Yeah. I kind of just see it as G. It's G Mixolydian, but I like the idea of 2-5-1. D minor 7. Sure, that would be cool. All right. Okay, good. Do you like to link major pentatonics? This is from Rano. Do you like to link major pentatonic with Mixolydian? Sure, because now Mixolydian exists inside major pentatonic, which is kind of cool. So I'll play major pentatonic, and it'll be a little more like Allman Brothers-y sounding, maybe. Well, it's a cool sound. I get a little tired of that, you know, because it just doesn't really have the feeling of Mixolydian. So now what I'll do is I'll think major pentatonic and Mixolydian. 2, 3. Bad notes are free. Now, instead of thinking that, I just like thinking, as I solo over this stuff, And I think Mixolydian, I sound very, Mixolydian-esque, if that makes sense. So really the way I like to look at it is like a G7 arpeggio, and then my notes that surround it, like, let's just try G minor blues, and I'm going to add in a natural third. So I'm getting that G major triad. All right, so new guitar. Still getting used to the new guitar. All right, so there I'm thinking G7, and thinking about a G minor pentatonic scale and adding in my natural third and blues scale. That's a great sound for this kind of vamp. So obviously we're getting into soloing, but let's keep rolling. So, right, let's scale. Ah! Play twice. All right, so don't play that note. I did that for fun. I did that for fun. It was just, just thought I'd see if you're paying attention. So to me, this is all that G minor pentatonic with an added natural third. Okay. Let's jump around. Some more questions. Hopefully that helped. All right. Wait. Okay, here we go. Down at the bottom. Thanks, Phil. This is from Baby John. How and where do you visualize the Mixolydian scale initially? Well, the first thing I'm going to do, it's a good question, is I would just learn the notes. First thing, it's the scale of no sharps or flats. So you could run the Mixolydian scale over this. All right, so. Nice and slow, just the notes, the no sharps and flats. Right? So just memorizing that, it's a C major scale. So that's the first thing I would do, is just play that scale. Now, am I thinking that scale when I'm soloing? Not really. I'm thinking, as I said earlier, I'm thinking about G7. I'm not so much thinking about the scale. I know the scale is my passing notes, right? But I'm not thinking about the actual scale itself, right? I'm not thinking Mixolydian. I know it's the overall sound, but what I am thinking is G7 and some of the bluesy stuff, like adding a natural third or a flatted third. So that's how I go through it first. You can run the scale. It's a great exercise as well, just kind of doing. Right, you know what I mean? Just kind of run through the scale over the background track so you can hear it, and then do the rhythmic subdivisions of it. And all that while, I'm still trying to see where my G7s are in here. Right? Or A7. You know, and start seeing all those inversions of the chord and how that sits inside the scale. So a lot of practice, just sitting down and playing over it using the right scale. Does that help? Okay. Can you give some other ideas for spicing up one vamps in addition to melodic content? For example, using open strings, octaves, whammy bar, whatever. Sure. Yeah. So first thing, and this is stuff I stole from Billy Gibbons and David Grissom. So David Grissom guitar. Great guitar player, obviously. And even better friend. All right, so what I'll look for right there, let's talk about that. So G7 is G, B, D, F, and I'm going to play the G, the F, and the G. I love that sound. And if you want to put in that third, it's a cool sound. If we talk about David, he'd never play the third like that, but... Right? So I'm going to play that. I like that sound a lot. So I'm just playing the open G string as my pedal tone or my ringing note, my drone. You know, that's the first time I learned that was from cheap sunglasses. So here, so F to G, E, G, just going down the Mixolydian scale. All sounds great. So let's play with that. I can do it all in one string, right? I can use as my lower string. All right, so that's one thing I can think about doing. I really love that sound. Like I said, you know, David's the king of that, and Billy Gibbons. I mean, that is just... Anytime I do that, I feel like I'm just borrowing from those guys, which is a great sound, but for sure. Especially if I'm playing this, then I feel like I'm really borrowing from them. All right, so now we could choose the B. Look at what's the open string. So the B note, which is your B string, is contained in your G Mixolydian scale, right? So I can use that, but that's very third, you know. You know, it works, but for me it's so bright a sound that I try to avoid that because I really want to get that, you know, that bluesier thing. And if you're pounding that third really hard, it's not my favorite sound, but it can be done for sure. And then I can do all sorts of stuff, like, you know, you can keep that G string open. Right, so just keeping that G ringing across everything. Playing sixth and just keeping the G on the inside, which is kind of a cool sound. Or the lower note, like I said. And I'm usually almost always hybrid picking that stuff. Okay, cool. So I got a lot. I can go on that forever. Tons of questions. Oh, awesome, guys. Thanks. Can can you go over the Mixolydian scale chords again? The diatonic chords to the key of C major. So C major chords are C major, D minor, E minor, F major, G major, A minor, and B diminished. So I can even play those. That sounds. That all sounds cool too, right? And I haven't gotten into those C's and triads, but that's the next spot, guys. So, really, ultimately, any of your diatonic triads can work to a lesser or greater extent over the modal vamp. And I say lesser or greater extent because sometimes you play them and you go, oh, that one doesn't sound so good. But Mixolydian, these things sound really great because if you're on a dominant seventh chord, we can take in a lot of information. Like dominant seventh chords can really handle a lot of fun. If you're playing like a minor A minor vamp, like Stairway to Heaven or something, or like just straight on Aeolian, some of those sounds don't work as well. Just there's something about that Mixolydian sound of the dominant seven. We really can apply all sorts of that bluesy element to it. Opens up a lot of harmonic ideas. Okay. What about chromaticism? Oh boy, that's a big one. Okay, the chromaticism is cool because what I'm thinking about is, okay, kind of easy. We'll take a G minor blues scale, right? Because we know the G minor blues scale sounds kind of cool over this, just blues, right? Okay, right? But you notice it's kind of missing something. It doesn't sound as cool as the other stuff. So we take the blues scale with the blue note. I want to hear that natural third on this. So I just play blue. It's cool, but it misses something. So the blues scale, though, we have some chromaticism right in there with the 4, flat 5, and 5, right? So we have the root, flat 3, 4, flat 5, and 5. So we have that. But if we add in our natural 3, as I said, so we can have root, flat 3, 4, flat 5, 5, we get that cool. Let's check out that. Right, so it's a cool sound. That's pretty cool. So that's a great way to dig into chromaticism. Take your blues scale, which has some built-in chromaticism, and add in your natural thirds well over this dominant seventh chord. And then you're starting to dig into playing chromatically. The trick about playing chromatically is how you resolve. And usually on a downbeat, but for me, a lot of that was trial and error. You know, figuring out other people's playing and thinking about just, messing around until you get it right. And a lot of it is, like I said, is trial and error just to get that phrasing just right. But a lot of transcribing, it's a big part of it. And listening to guys who do that, if you like, chromaticism, certainly someone like Robin Ford is great for that. That's where I learned a lot. John Schofield. Even you hear John Mayer do this kind of stuff because it's all that same kind of stuff. Blues, slightly more advanced blues, other than straight ahead minor pentatonic stuff. Okay. All right. There you go. Do you look at mixo over pentatonic? I kind of touched on it earlier. I mean, a G major pentatonic scale is contained in a G Mixolydian scale. You could look at a G minor pentatonic is sort of contained in a G Mixolydian scale if you raise your 3 up a half step. And you can get that cool dominant pentatonic sound. That's where I'm just taking the minor pentatonic and raising up the 3rd a half step. And I've talked about this in some of the lockdowns, but I love that sound. Right, that kind of thing there. That's a great sound. If I add in that flat 3, there's some chromaticism with the flat 3 and a blue note. Natural 7. Everything. All right. So yeah, but like I said, I try to think about G7. I know it's kind of it's just the way I think about it. I don't think much about straight Mixolydian anymore. I think about G7 and how I can ornament those notes. So I'm thinking about the chord, and then, you know, how the blues lick or adding into chromaticism resolves to chord tones. All right. Okay. So this is Graham Ross. So do all modes have major scale or alternative? Yeah, all modes have major and minor scales in them. And I did talk about one of the breakdowns for the Dorian modal pentatonic Dorian stuff. You can play, in this case, for better or for worse, depending on how you work it out, G Mixolydian, the 3 major triads we're using, C, F, and G. I can use a C major, G major, and F major pentatonic scale. And if you write that out, you put all those notes together, you get G, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. You get a G Mixolydian scale. So that's kind of cool too. Let's hear some of those sound. G major, C major, F major pentatonic. So here's G major. F major pentatonic. So that sounds by itself. We have to resolve it right though. C major pentatonic. So that you have to be careful with the resolutions, but if I put them together and say like a lick, C major, G major, F major. So I can really kind of have some fun with those too. And it's just a different way of thinking about it. But every mode will have 3 pentatonic scales. So you guys hanging on? All right, hold on. So you have 3 pentatonic scales. So in this case, it's the 3 major pentatonic scales, right? Major pentatonic scales have relative minors, right? So the 3 relative minor pentatonic scales work as well. So in other words, G major pentatonic is also E minor pentatonic. C major pentatonic is A minor pentatonic. F major pentatonic is D minor pentatonic. So the 3 major triads that you have in the scale, you can use each of those 3 major triads, or if you see them as 3 minor triads, you can use the same related 3 minor pentatonic scales. All right, that would be another hour to talk about that. But thanks everybody hanging in. It's a bunch of people. I know people are going back to work and everything, so I really appreciate everybody being here. All right. Okay, this is Sam Stamos. In modes like Mixolydian, which starts on the 5th of the major scale, how are you arranging the bass line? It's confusing that the root is the 5 chord. Okay. It's a good question. Modes always kind of screw everybody up. Angus Clark. What's up, dude? All right. that's a whole modal discussion. You have to just think about a mode as a sound. The scale, I like to look at it this way. G Mixolydian and C major, C Ionian, are both the same scale. They're the scale of no sharps or flats. So I'm playing that G7 chord, and it takes the same, it happens to share the same notes as C major. I don't see it starting the root being the 5. I see the root just being G. And I'm playing the notes that are the correct notes would be no sharps or flats. So how do you think about that? Well, you need to know the notes of the scale of no sharps or flats, right? So that's C major, it's G Mixolydian, it's Aeolian, D Dorian, E Phrygian, F Lydian, whatever. It's none of those scales unless you play it over the specific chord that will make it sound like that scale. In other words, if I went like, right? I play the same. It's going to sound like C major, but if I do, I saved the same scale, I played the same chord progression, but I just inverted it, but now the tonal center became G. So by changing the tonal center, the notes take on a different sound, and they take on the G Mixolydian sound, as opposed to sounding like C Ionian. There's lots of great, certainly in the internet, definitions of how the modes work. I know over at TrueFire, my friend Robbie Calvo has got some really good modal courses if you want to get deep into that. But the way I look at it, it's just it's the same notes. I don't see it as two separate things. It's the same notes, and it's the chord progression that will define the sound of the scale. Okay. Can you hold up one of your Jazz 3 picks for the camera? Do you use the really tiny ones, real small? Okay. I use the Black Ice by Diodario. They're slightly larger than a regular old Jazz 3, which I've been using for years, and slightly larger, just enough larger that I don't feel like I'm losing it. For some reason, I was using the Jazz 3s for a while, and I got to this point where I just felt like I was having a hard time holding on to them as well as I would like. I don't know, changing technique or something. So I found these are really good. I like the sound of these. They have the smaller, the Jazz 3 sort of footprint, but not quite as small as the Jazz 3. And you got the pointy side, and I also play with the rounded side quite a bit. So it's the Diodario Black Ice. It's kind of worn away right now, and this is the 1.5 millimeter. I like the sound of them. They're kind of a little darker pick, and I like a darker sounding pick. All right. All right. Angus Clark. How about voicing lines based on fourths? Voicing with fourths and seconds. I have no idea what you're talking about. Sure. You can do anything. Well, an interesting thing we could do on any of this stuff is I can play any of the chords or notes that are diatonic to the scale. So if I take something like Angus was saying, sort of fourths, and I bring it up through the key, or I could do it this way. No, let's take that. So I could take any shape. There's the cool thing. I could take any shape and harmonize it through the key of G Mixolydian. So maybe something like, let's do something fun. Yeah. I'll do that all the time. Right? You get that great, these really cool sounds. I'm just moving up one note from the chord to the next note in the scale. Well, that's cool. Let's hear that, Oh yeah. Some of those are really nice. Yeah, I like that. I like this one. I gotta remember this one. There you go. And the Halsworth stuff. Okay. So all I'm doing there is I'm picking a voicing that's diatonic to the key and just working it through. And that's where you come up with some of those cool things that I just did. All right. Hey, welcome to Spain in the house. Thank you very much for joining us. And thanks for everybody saying that you like the lessons. I appreciate it. Thank you. I like doing this. It's a ton of fun. Thanks, everyone. Okay, cool. So once again, how I go through this, just starting from the top, I can do the G7 voicings, right, and kind of work through those chords that are contained in G Mixolydian. Those are great. And then thinking about the 1, flat 7 and 4 triads, more easily said in this case, C, F, and G triads, and then use them over the 1 chord vamp. The concept being is those triads are diatonic to the key. So we can use them and they sound awesome. As we discovered a little later, due to a very good question, was what about the rest of the chords in the key? So yes, I can use all of the diatonic triads contained within G Mixolydian as some rhythm guitar ideas, for better or for worse. When I say that is, in Mixolydian they all sound pretty cool. In Aeolian they don't sound as cool. In Dorian they sound pretty nice, but we'll kind of get more into that kind of stuff. But for Mixolydian, it all sounds pretty cool. So once again, like that, you know? Right? All right. So I'm just playing all the diatonic triads, and I said I'll do another episode on soloing with these, but the first thing you want to do is figure them out. And any, I say fusion guy, worth their salt, does this stuff because it's part of the sound. You know, when you hear those other sounds, when you have this one static chord, as the whole point of this lesson is, what do you do with that one chord? Sometimes it's really frustrating. You're playing and you're like, I'm out of ideas. I'm just sitting there doing, which is something you never really want to do. And I figured out through, I learned that any of your diatonic triads work perfectly in this kind of situation. Okay, cool, guys. Thanks so much for stopping by today, as always. Hope everybody's doing well, and hope everybody is getting back to work soon, or not, or enjoying not working from home, which is kind of fun, I guess. All right, so all my courses are on sale through my website. Only 25% off of any course. Anybody who's ordered them, I really appreciate it. Another course that touches on this directly, but I will have something that will touch on this directly in the coming months. So thanks for being here once again. Thanks so much for Phil Mingen helping out, and everybody joined me. And I will see you on Saturday morning at 11 a.m. with Jason Laughlin's going to come back and do another lesson. He's always great to have on. And so the first time he was the good sport who came on when I first started doing this stuff a few months ago, and the audio was just horrible. And I've learned a lot since then. So I'm going to have Jason on Saturday morning at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. And thanks, everyone. Thanks for anybody who hit the tip jar today. I really appreciate it. And I'll see y'all soon. Bye-bye.